So I thought it might be finally time to tell the story of the Ultra guitar, and I've probably talked about bits of it in the past, but I don't think I've ever really told the full story in its entirety. And I suppose this story is much more than just about a guitar. Really, it's a story about inspiration, about how this guitar has kind of woven right through the whole story of Emerald guitars. Right from the origins to influencing right to today. And to just kind of give context and take it right back to the very beginning. Whenever I first started college, I didn't play guitar. I was always fascinated by guitar, but I went to college and a guy, Donald played me Steve Vai's Passion of Warfare. And it was just like nothing I had ever heard before. It just totally was this profound effect that, you know, so many people have had that same effect with Steve Vai. And so much so that a week later I went out and bought my first guitar. So fast forward that on a few years, and obviously an avid Steve Vai fan. Steve Vai was coming to play in Vicar Street in Dublin as part of the Ultrazone tour. And I went there and saw him play. And at this stage, I had made a few guitars. I had started the very early origins of Emerald guitars, which was me learning how to build acoustic guitars. So, and I think that's an important aspect of the fact that at this stage, I'd only ever built acoustic guitars. And not really built them very well. I was really just learning. But Steve Vai stepped out on stage that night. And it was the Ultrazone tour, and I remember he had like a type of a face mask type thing on. The background at the back of the stage was the album cover from the Ultrazone, and so he was there, kind of dressed like the alien from the front of the Ultrazone, but just with his regular Ibanez gem. And I looked at that and I thought, that's not right. And so I remember going back home and thinking, he needs that real guitar. And I hadn't really thought about the fact that it hadn't ever been made before, or could it be made, or anything. I just knew I had to make it. And it was just that compulsion that night. So the very next day, I set about trying to build that guitar. So I had the album cover, and this is the album cover that I used. I took it out of the CD sleeve, and I just started to try and scale it out, trying to work out how I could take this album cover, take this piece of fantastical art, and make it into something that was playable. And I think actually Steve asked me one time, he said, why did you think you could build it? And I think my answer was that I didn't know I couldn't. And that was kind of the way I was back then. You know, it's that young, naive attitude where everything's kind of possible. So really it was a compulsion. I knew I had to build that guitar. So I started building it, and it was kind of complicated, and it definitely was taking a lot of time, and it was kind of set aside to move on to some other things. But I remember then going to NAMM show in January 2002. And if you've ever been to NAMM show, you know it's a crazy festival of music, thousands and thousands of people, and when somebody like Steve Vai is there, there's a queue a mile long waiting to get his autograph. You never get to talk to Steve Vai at NAMM show. So I was walking up one of the side corridors, and there was this small booth. It was the NARAS booth, the National Recording Artists Association, and Steve was there. And I remember walking past, and it was just like a second glance. I was like, that's Steve Vai. And there was like 3 people there waiting to get his autograph. So I stood in this incredibly short line. I think he wasn't supposed to be there. Nobody knew he was going to be there. So there was no crowd. And that in itself was a unique thing that I've never seen ever happen again since that at NAMM show. But I walked up and I said, hey Steve, I'm Alistair from Ireland. And he said, oh yeah, Ireland. We just this morning I was working on something they recorded in Ireland. And so that was really cool, the fact that that morning he had been in the studio working on a piece that they had recorded live in Dublin. So I said, you know the Ultra guitar from the album cover, I've started making it. And I think, you know, he just thought I was another one of the crazy fans with a crazy idea. And he said, oh yeah, interesting, cool. He said, well, if you ever finish it, send a picture of it to this guy. And he wrote down the name, Rich Pike, and an email address, and that was the end of it. So it was just an incredible moment. It was the first time that I'd ever talked to my hero, and I got to tell him about a guitar that I was going to build for him. And I think Steve actually maybe said afterwards that, you know, it never really registered that I would build that guitar. But I did. I went back and I think I spent about 1,000 hours building that guitar. And I remember everything else was put aside, and I thought, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to build the guitar. And I built it and I completed it. And, you know, I think, you know, almost luckily the design had all the elements to make a playable instrument. The scale on the neck and the various aspects just made it playable. So we figured out a way to do it. I managed to work out how to make the headless design. Obviously there's no tuners on the original design. So I used a Steinberger system in the middle of it. So there was no tuners at the headstock. And the really cool thing, I don't even have it on the album cover, but on the back of the CD, you get to see the back of the alien. So, like, you never have a piece of artwork where you get to see the back of the piece of artwork, but on that album cover you do. So I got to see elements of the back of the guitar. So yeah, I was able to make it really lifelike, and used a special color changing paint. But I just remember it being one of the most exciting things to be working on this and bringing this thing to life. And yeah, looking back, it was out of naivety. You know, this idea that a guy who had never built an electric guitar before was going to build an electric guitar for Steve Vai. That in itself is kind of absurd, right? So I built it, I finished it, and I remember taking a picture of it and sending it on to Rich Pike. And I didn't hear anything back. And then I sent another picture. And then we made other contacts, couldn't get anywhere, heard nothing back. And I was starting to get really deflated that, you know, I'd done all this work and now I couldn't get it to Steve. And I heard back afterwards, actually, this is a conversation at a later date, that I think when I sent them the picture, they didn't actually think it was real. They thought it was like some kind of computer generated image, which maybe is a tribute in itself, but or maybe it's more a case of how bad my digital camera was at the time, that it looked so pixelated that it didn't look real. But eventually, anyway, one Wednesday morning, I get this email saying Steve would love to see the guitar. And I don't think maybe they realized that I was in Ireland and Steve was in LA. So they said, yeah, Steve would love to see the guitar, he's free Saturday morning. So this is Wednesday morning. So I remember it was just the craziest thing. I went that afternoon, booked flights, left that night to fly to London to have Guitarist magazine photograph it. I contacted them, they wanted to feature it. They photographed it, spent an entire day there doing that. Then on the Friday flew to LA, got there late Friday night, and then Saturday morning arrived up at Steve's house. And you know, whenever you're starting off as a guitar maker, and at this stage I had never given a guitar to anybody, I had never sold a guitar to anybody. This was to be the first guitar to leave my possession. So essentially the Ultra guitar is guitar number one, and not a lot of people know that. But yeah, first guitar that I ever made, really, or certainly first guitar that ever left my possession.
This is the first guitar you ever made?
Pretty much. So wow. I had been building
now I'm really impressed.
Well, I've been building acoustic guitars for about 3 years before this.
Okay.
But I'd never let one out of my hands. Pretty much they were all either broken up and scrapped, or they've been screwed to the roof of my factory, and they're still there. So this guitar was the first, well, it's the first electric guitar I ever built. Wow. And it's the first guitar that ever left my possession. Yeah, so I arrived at Steve's house, and we brought the guitar in, and it was just a surreal thing to be at Steve Vai's house, you know. This young guy from Ireland, arriving at his hero's house to give him a guitar that he had made. And I remember we brought it into the studio and opened up the case, and Steve's first words were, "Holy shit." And I'll never forget those words. And I think it was probably the right reaction. Maybe he had that reaction as well when he seen me walking in with that crazy case. But yeah, it was just so cool. He plugged it in, checked out the guitar, was so kind about the design, and I just knew I had done something special. But Steve said, well, I can't keep this guitar. You've put too much effort into this, so you should have it back. But to me, whenever you make a guitar, it really is, it's just a piece of artwork until it's actually played as an instrument, until it fulfills its purpose. And to me, the Ultra guitar was a beautiful sculpture that I had made, but it wasn't a guitar until Steve Vai would own it and have it and play it. So I said, Steve, definitely you have to keep this guitar. So he said, right, okay, well, if I'm going to keep it, I'm going to pay for it. And he walked out of the room, and he went into his house and came back with a jar of honey. And I thought this was the most perfect payment for my work. A jar of fire garden honey. And he said, well, this is something that me and my bees have created, and this is in return for what you've created. And it really was truly one of the best things, and I treasured every bite of that honey on my toast, and I've kept that jar ever since. But the story doesn't end there. It's not a case of, you know, just making a guitar, you get it to your hero, and that's the end of that. There was so much more to it, because I suppose really at that stage I had this big dream and idea that I could become a guitar maker. And it's like I started off right at the top. And you know, you could just kind of, you know, not really do anything with that. But that gave me an opportunity. Steve Vai introduced me to many other people. I got to know, you know, people like Billy Sheehan and Dave Weiner and all the people in the band. And people like Thomas Nordig, who was just such an inspiration to me as well and helped me and guided me. So it was just a really big kickstart to have this, I guess, this community of friends. They very quickly became friends, and that really helped me. But it helped me in practical ways, but more so it just inspired me to keep on trying to achieve things. You get a taste of that, you want to do a little bit more, and I did, and you know, we've made 7,000 or 8,000 guitars since, and I don't think anything as special as the Ultra guitar, but it was the starting point. But it went on so much further, and it weaves through good times and bad times. So Emerald Guitars was a difficult birth. It was hard to bring to life, and I ended up having to stop it for a while. And around about 2010, I was just starting to get back into making guitars again. And I think it was 2011 that I met Steve in Holland. He was there doing a thing with an orchestra. And I met Steve, and he mentioned to me, he said, Alistair, I think I want to take that guitar out on tour. And I was like, that guitar? Which guitar? Because I'd also made a 7-string acoustic guitar for him, and I thought he meant that. He said, no, the Ultra guitar. And it just blew my mind. Because at the start, I always dreamt that Steve would play the guitar on stage, but I thought that time was gone. The Ultra guitar, the Ultra Zone tour is gone. You know, it didn't fit. Why would he ever use that on stage again? But he was going out on tour again. He wanted something unique, and you know, as Steve likes to do on every tour, have something that's a visual centerpiece, that's a talking point. And he said he wanted to use the Ultra guitar, so that was fantastic. And but he said, I think I maybe like to do a few things to it. And I remember straight away me thinking, is this guitar playable? You know, 10 years on, you've got much more understanding, and you're thinking, how's this ever going to work? Is this guitar really going to be playable on stage? Can he really take it on tour all around the world? So I was a little bit freaked out about it, and I said, well, Steve, I'd like to kind of see the guitar, get it back, make sure, you know, I can look over it with my new knowledge and make sure it played well. So we had agreed that I would go over, I'd get the guitar, and Steve said, well, I'd maybe like you to do a few things to it. Now, you kind of think, you know, a guitar that's shaped like that, you know, has all these appendages and strange pieces, kind of would be enough, but no, for Steve it needed to be a little bit more. So we agreed that we were going to add in LEDs, we were going to add in lasers, and make it just even more crazy and wild. So so that happened. I flew over, and this is where it kind of intertwines into one of the really hard bits, and I don't think I've talked about this before, but you know, Emerald Guitars, pursuing a dream that's as big as this, it takes you into some hard places. You know, you have to sacrifice a lot. And we went through periods where there was no money, but there was still a dream. And it was the dream and the memories of the things that I had achieved, the people that I had met that kept me going through that. And I remember flying over to pick up the Ultra guitar. So this was going to be like one of the greatest things, you know, to get the Ultra guitar again. But the reality is, that stage I had no money. We were really rock bottom. So I was using my father's credit card, a borrowed credit card, to try and get around and do some stuff. And I flew to LA, and I went to pick up the car that I had hired, and they wouldn't give it to me because my ID didn't match the credit card. And I remember I was in rock bottom. There I was in LA, going to pick up a guitar from Steve Vai. You know, all my friends think I'm a rock star. I'm flying off to LA, you know, it's great. I was penniless, you know, barely had any money in my pocket, and I couldn't even hire a car. And so that night I went and I stayed in a hotel beside the airport, and I was just, it was awful. It was like rock bottom. I had no way to go and pick up the guitar for Steve. I was stuck at an airport hotel, and but I called Thomas Nordig, and Thomas had become a great friend. And Thomas said, well, I'll come to the airport, I'll sort this out for you. And Thomas Nordig came to my rescue that day, and paid for my car hire. And I've never acknowledged that before, I've never mentioned that, but Thomas Nordig, he saved my ass. And, you know, it was just another layer of inspiration of, you know, it was that inspiration that carried me that far. But the people that I've met along the way, they were going to carry me that little bit further. And I'll be forever grateful for that. You know, that small little act that really just helped me another step of the way. So we built that guitar, or we went and picked up the guitar, discussed the ideas with Steve, and brought it back to Ireland. And Steve also agreed that I could make a mold of it and make some replicas of it. I thought that'd be a really cool thing to do for some other Steve Vai fans to make some other Ultra guitars. So I brought it back and made a mold, and this is the master pattern that we created to make the mold. And so it kind of shows you the scale of it, you know, when you're holding it in your hands. So I still have this. This is my memory of that guitar. And we made a mold. We made, I think, 8 replicas in all. And then, I think it was summer of 2012, Steve was taking it out on tour in Fort Lauderdale. I got to go there, see him step out on stage for the very first time in that crazy suit with the lasers, and the guitar with the lasers, and it just blew my mind. Such an amazing time. And then later on that tour, Steve then came back to Dublin, and I knew I had to do something special because he was coming back to play the Ultra guitar on the same stage where I got the inspiration to build the Ultra guitar 10 years prior. So we had made some of the Ultra guitar replicas. I arranged for the people that had purchased them to come pick them up at the factory, and then all go together to Vicar Street to Dublin and see the tour. And Steve did this fantastic meet and greet, which was probably a crazy thing where you've got, I think there was 4 or 5 people there with ultra guitars and Steve with his ultra guitar, and it was just really ultra special. And just a great moment, a great thing to be part of, and it just brought it all full circle, and really was something to be part of. Steve went on then to tour around the world with that guitar, and I think played 200-300 shows with that guitar, and took it in its crazy case. I always thought they would maybe make a proper flight case for the guitar, but it actually went in the original case, which was obviously a bigger version of this, and I seen pictures of it like in being checked in at airports and sitting on top of trolleys, and I'm like, this thing it has holes in it. It was made with a grid in it, but it survived, and a testament to the guitar. The guitar played well. Steve loved it. It sounded amazing. Everybody was wowed, and just one of those amazing things to be part of. But one other little element in the story, way sometimes you maybe want to be able to relive some incredible moment from your past, or you'd like to be a fly on the wall and see what that was like. Well, that moment where I first met Steve at the NAMM show in 2002, I was just there. He was signing an autograph for me, and I was just there talking to him. But 2-3 years later, I met this lady at NAMM show again, and she said, I recognize your face from somewhere. And just kind of a random thing, but she said, I've got something for you. So the next day she came and she brought me an envelope, and she handed me this envelope, and I opened up the envelope, and inside was a picture of me talking to Steve Vai. So somebody who I wasn't even there with took a photograph of Steve Vai, not of me, but it was while I was there talking to Steve Vai, and I have that photograph. So it's just been the most incredible centerpiece to so much of my life. It's the thing that has inspired me. Steve has gone from being a hero to still a hero, but also I get to call him a friend, and he continually inspires me, as he inspires so many people with his music and his genius and the crazy creations that he has brought to life. But I just thought it would be nice to share that story, and hopefully it might inspire some others out there. If you've got a dream that's big enough, it is possible. Even if it's crazy, don't ever, ever, ever think your dream isn't possible. Dream it and make it happen.